The reason is that, as you go along, the more and more references you come up with, you might come up with a reference 200 articles down the road that refer to an article that you read at number 15, and then you have to spend time looking for it. It is a big hassle and you're wasting time. Don't do that. Key it in, and you'll save yourself a lot of time. Please remember, enter all the pages. Even if you're not quoting anything, enter the pages. Yeah, because I found out at the end, at my course, that I made this mistake. So don't do that. Enter the pages. Choose the appropriate referencing style. INCEIF has its own style, which you will find in the thesis guide. That style is compatible with both the Chicago styles. There are two referencing styles under the Chicago style. One is the notes bibliography style. You'll find that there's a number at the end of text, and then at the footnote there's a reference. So that's the notes bibliography style. And then the other style is the author date style. So you put the author and the date. Now that's Chicago style. And another style that is close is the APA, or American Psychology Association style, which is very useful in social sciences. Why I like APA style is because they focus on dates. And if you are in an area where it's a constant change in the body of knowledge, the dates are very important. Whatever you do, make your styles consistent in your work. Because maybe in April 2009, I started out with a certain way, and then by January 2010, I was doing something else, and I did something else. And then when I combined, it was a hotspot. So make sure you're consistent in your referencing style. Don't mix between them. Let's move to the research part. Okay. So qualitative data collection methods include interviews, focus groups, and document or text research. In my case, I chose interviews and text research. And I had a lot of help from my main supervisor and the people to interview. Right down to making connections for me in the US and allowing me to visit the Center on Philanthropy in Indianapolis. They took me under their wing and they arranged for me to interview different organizations. So please don't underestimate the supervisor's input and recommendations. They can really help you. I also requested a letter of introduction from the GSD so that I could produce it in my request for interviews. This is very helpful. Without this, I think it would be difficult for you to get interviews. Now, please be aware that some documents that are shown to you are confidential, and you must be sensitive to this. When I go for interviews in Malaysia, especially, I forward them a list of my questions first, ahead of time. But usually, by the time I get to the interview, I find out they don't really like to stick to my questions. And maybe it's a Malaysian way, but they like to chat about things. More informal question and answer style. I transcribe all interviews. Once I go home, I transcribe the interviews. I converted them into case studies, and then I sent them back to my interviewees. I needed to be sure that they would approve it, that whatever documents that I mentioned were allowed. So please make sure you have this approval and consent. And over time, what will happen is a pattern will emerge from your interviews and case studies. And it makes it easier for you to categorize your data. Okay, more books that I recommend for doing your research is chapter 3 out of this book. This book is in KMC. And this book, if you Google and search, you can actually download it for free. So this will help you if you're doing qualitative analysis. Don't worry about taking notes, okay? Because I will take all this to transfer and share it with you. Alright. Okay, I have to admit that the next 3 slides on qualitative analysis was a watermark for me, and it actually sparked off the subject of my talk today. Because, as I mentioned, I only realized that my analysis chapter was missing after my external examiner had come back. Oh. Okay, that was not funny because I had only 1 week between the time I received feedback and my Viva to come up with an analysis chapter. So that's the reason why I feel it's so important for me to share this with you, to remind you, please don't forget your analysis chapter. Some of you may have already known this. I didn't know it, so bear with me. Once you have your research data chapter done, you have to produce an account of it. So according to Day, the writer that I mentioned in the book before this, you have to be able to describe your data in terms of context, the intentions of the parties involved, and the process over which it occurred. And then you must be able to classify or categorize them, and then connect them with a big idea. So give an analysis and account of the phenomena that you discovered in your analysis chapter. Now, you would have already determined your methodology earlier on, right? So in my case, the specific ones that I chose was predicated on the material for data that I had in mind. So for the first hypothesis, which was a historical hypothesis, I used historical articles. I used books and texts and laws and legal cases to reconstruct the hypothesis. So this was essentially content analysis and legal reasoning. For the second hypothesis, which was an economics perspective, I conducted interviews, I drew up case studies, and I did comparison and content analysis. And for the final hypothesis on going forward and reform, I did content analysis. And at the end of your analysis, INCEIF would expect that you come up with some proposal or model. So make sure you corroborate your proposal against your data. Don't leave that out. Okay? Because that's very important. It was raised to me by my external examiner. Don't forget that. Your academic supervisor. So this is the most important relationship that you have during your years working on your work. So my advice is manage it well. You must be flexible. Okay? My big idea version 2 came about during my third draft. Yeah, not my first draft, not my second draft, my third draft. And I also redrafted one of my hypotheses at that time. And both were at the suggestion not of my main supervisor, but of my co-supervisor. Please balance between them. Yeah, you may have 2, you may have 3. Please balance between them. Make sure you CC both of them on all your emails. Both and all your supervisors must agree. Okay? Very important. They are boss. Alright? Just remember that. Give them the first few chapters early on, just to be sure you're on the right track. Keep all the drafts that they commented on. Keep all your emails and make notes of all your meetings. I strongly suggest as well, in addition to your academic supervisors, keep a close contact with the GSD, especially head of GSD. When you meet him in the hallways or anywhere, just brief him. It doesn't have to be a formal meeting, but keep him brief. Okay? Okay, I cannot underestimate the importance of writing group. In my case, both Karim and Shikim were part of my writing group. And we had very regular meetings in the beginning, once a month. And the rule was that we had to be absolutely brutal with each other. At every meeting, we decided whose work was going to be discussed. We really, we didn't allow each other to slack. If something didn't make sense, we said this doesn't make sense. So make your writing group members account, because it's for their good, it's for your own good as well. And after about 6 meetings, we started tapering off into our writing. May I suggest your final draft, before it goes to your supervisors, the final one, get one of them to read. It's a huge imposition, because by that time we're all busy with our own work. It's a huge imposition, but do it. Ask one of them to read it in its entirety and give a feedback. Okay, your examination. The end of your writing happens when you submit your work for examination. Once both your supervisors have signed off or confirmed by email, because in my case, Prof. Murad was in Turkey, so he couldn't sign off. So they confirmed by email that they had agreed to my draft. You submit 2 copies to the GSD for the internal and external examiners. In my case, the GSD chose the internal and external examiners. These were sent off simultaneously to both. But I believe in some others' case, they sent it to the internal first, waited for that before it went to the external. I'm not quite sure what the actual policy is, but in my case, it was sent off to both simultaneously. Whatever it is, please note there is a timing for doing this in the guides. So please note these requirements. I'm not sure, but I think you have to put in an application about 4 months before they're expecting your viva. 4 or 5 months, quite a long period, but look at the guidelines. So after you send your work for examination, you can relax. 1 month, 2 months, have a holiday. You're not going to hear back from them so quickly. Like in my case, I heard back in a month. So I didn't have much rest. And the feedback I received was very interesting. Some were similar because mine came back simultaneously, both internal and external. Some comments were similar. And the ones that are similar, I took very seriously. For example, my analysis, my lack of analysis, both of them said that. So I took that very seriously. There were others which were completely different from each other. For example, in terms of the length of my work, I had written a very long work. I was worried about it. It was 110,000 words already. My internal examiner wanted me to cut it down to 60,000 words. My external examiner wanted me to add on to it. So, yeah. So which one do you do, right? What do you do? So, never mind. I went on to the viva. So I still wasn't sure, but okay, I went on to the viva. What I did was I prepared for my viva as if I had incorporated the revisions requested by the examiners. So for the ones that they were in agreement with, incorporate it immediately. Don't wait. Okay? And when you prepare for your viva, and you prepare your PowerPoint presentation, do it as if you've already revised it. Okay? For those comments which were different from each other, I kept it for the viva. And I actually raised it during the committee, during the viva, and said that my internal wanted this, my external wanted that. My preference was to keep it at the length, and I explained why as well. So you must be able to justify your reasons for choosing one version over the other during your viva. I would suggest that you do some homework on your internal and external examiners. You find out their specialization, so you have some idea of how to answer their queries and how to revise your work later. My viva took 2.5 hours. I felt I was addressing the federal court. And because they asked me questions throughout the presentation. It wasn't like I presented and they asked me questions. Every slide there were questions left, right, and center. But I was quite happy with that because that way I could assess. It gave me a chance to assess which way they were going, what they wanted out of me. So I liked that. I'm not quite sure whether you all will feel the same way. So at the end of all that, of course, some corrections they ask you to do note down because you will have to do it later. So jot it down. At the end of that, they asked me to step out for a while. They sat down and talked. They asked me to come in and they told me that they tasked me with minor corrections and they made a decision that I didn't have to cut down on my thesis and what. So I had an issue with bibliography because I had chosen a referencing style which was author and date, but my internal examiner wanted me to do the notes bibliography style, which would have taken so much time for me to redo everything. So what I did was I approached her directly after the viva. I spoke with her and explained to her why I chose the author date style, that it was consistent with INCEIF, that my predecessor, which was Karim had chosen that style and he had been accepted on those grounds. So my internal examiner agreed and said that I may keep my referencing style. But what I'm basically saying is please try to balance everyone's point of view and accommodate it. And speak to them if you have to try and persuade them. Act as a mediator between any opposing views, because whatever it is, you're going to need all of them to sign off on your work. Yeah? So make sure everybody agrees. It's not easy, but you have to do it. So the last stage is the revisions and the binding of your work. But depending on the extent of revisions, you may have between 3 to 6 months. I was given 3 months because they said pass with minor revisions. But my Viva was on the 26th of September, Convocation was on the 15th of October. I had 2 weeks only, basically, if I had wanted to convocate. And that was really the hardest part for me. I didn't sleep for more than 4 hours probably every night, so that I could finish the revisions and submit it to my main supervisor. So when I did that, I marked all the changes. I gave him a note on what parts were changed. From Murad read it in 4 days, and he told me to bind it. So for your bound dissertation or thesis, make sure you have your authorization to submit page. That page will consist of all the signatures eventually that you're going to need to make sure that everything is approved. Make 5 copies at least. GST requires 4 copies. You would want 1 for yourself. If you have to give 1 copy to your institution, then there's an extra copy. But I would suggest make 5 copies and deliver it personally to the GST. They will arrange for all the signatures you need, and they will arrange for the delivery of the signed bound copy to the KMC. Make sure you get back your personal copy. Okay? So basically that was the end of my journey. The ideal version 3. It came up at the Viva. So I changed my title for the last time after external examiners at the Viva. And they approved it at the Viva. So even at the Viva, you can still change. Alright, so don't be attached. My final title was Unleashing the Potential of the Waqf as an Economic Institution in Malaysia, Legal, Economic, and Policy Reforms. So, thank you very much. And that's my email and telephone number if you want to reach me. I haven't talked about my thesis, but I thought maybe if you have any questions to ask, maybe you can ask now. We'll get that over and done with. If you still have the stomach, listen to me about my thesis. I'll go through it. Otherwise, I'll just chat very briefly about it. Any questions?
Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Tunku. I'd like to ask, what's the biggest challenge in writing research from the qualitative point of view compared to the writing a thesis or dissertation from the quantitative of view?
Oh, you know, I didn't do a quantitative one.
Yeah, I mean
so I can't comment on the quantitative one. But the qualitative one, in terms of, like I told you, my interviewees didn't like my 6 questions. They liked chatting, you know, so it was sometimes difficult to get the information to categorize it eventually because they would veer into their favorite subject. I found that personally as a challenge, and it depends on the personality of your interviewees as well. You don't have much chance. Sometimes you just have one chance to interview them, and you have to try and extract as much as possible from them during that time. So to me, that was a really big challenge in data collection for qualitative research. Anything else? Shoot. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. That goes into my thesis proper. I identified quite a lot of problems with development. It boils down to number one, the idea of alienability. Yeah, because as you know, okay, let's start from the beginning. As you know, Waqf falls under the State Religious Council in Malaysia. It's the only country in the whole world whereby Waqf property is entrusted to the State Religious Council. They are the sole trustees and all assets vest under them. Okay, so, and their setup is a statutory body. When you're a statutory body, you have some restrictions. You can't borrow unless you get Ministry of Finance approval. Your accounts have to be a certain way. You are considered as a public servant in another way. So they have a lot of restrictions as a statutory body. Okay, so that is one aspect that when you find it's difficult to develop land financing because they're restricted in the borrowing. Okay, number two, each state council has a different setup depending on the state. So for example, Terengganu, a lot of the council members are ulama. Okay? You look at Perak and Selangor, a lot of the council members were, Selangor, a lot of the council members were state state government officials. So their perspective is very, they're coming from a state perspective. And then you look at Perak, a lot of their council members are territorial chiefs, aristocrats. So that's a different perspective again. And then Penang, which falls under the Yang di-Pertuan Agong, they're different again. So each of them have a different perspective on how they manage the Waqf. And as a result of which, the levels of conservatism, how conservative with them, with their decisions to develop and to get financing also depends on the personalities of these people. Then there is the fact that in every state religious council, the mufti is a member. To me, from a lawyer's perspective, there's a conflict situation that arises because the mufti is also the final arbiter of Islamic law or Islamic matters within the state. Okay? On the one hand, he's the final arbiter. But on the other hand, you also sit on the State Religious Council that makes decisions. If somebody has a grievance, if somebody wants to ask you questions, if somebody wants to ask you for accountability, how do you do that? You go to the Sharia court, then the Sharia court refers back to the mufti. So there's a problem there as well. Okay? And then the other thing is it falls back to what are the various forms of financing that you can obtain. And you will find in Malaysia, they will go into very, very conservative, low risk, low return type of financing for Waqf assets. So you will find Ijara, yeah? They go into joint ventures on the basis of Ijara. They ask the developer to develop the property, and then a certain portion of the property will be rented back or given to the State Religious Council as their share, and then the developer has a right to rent out the premises for fixed term or even sell it for 99 years, for example. But really the returns to the State Religious Council or the Waqf is not as big, or rather, put it the other way, the cost is very high. Yeah. So you have a lot of factors, and if you like, I can share with you later because I don't want to bore the rest. But yeah, there are a lot of challenges with development. And the last thing also is funding. Okay, you have funding from the federal government, and I think in the last Malaysia plan, they gave, not sure, was it 21 million or something like that? I can't remember the actual amount. But the funding method is very, very strict. If they want, because the rule is that the federal government funds cannot be used for other things other than federal government matters, but Waqf falls under state matters. So there's a convoluted way on documentation whereby the Waqf has to go through a lease with the Federal Land Commissioner, and then they will give it back somehow. There's a management agreement, so the transaction cost is very high as well. But there's a lot of things to talk about if you want about financing. And please, email me and talk to me after this. I'll share with you. Okay, the question is, how do you manage time? I was working, you're right. Okay, I'm not expecting anybody to do this, alright? I woke up at 4 in the morning. I stop at about 7 because I do some exercise. I go to work. I steal time and work and do some more work in the office. Okay, don't do that. And then when I come home, I work some more. I have dinner at 7:30. 8 o'clock I work again. At 9 o'clock I stop because my brains cannot stop otherwise, and I go to sleep at 10. That went on for 2.5 years. That was the only way I did it, and I don't know whether anybody else would do that. You won't be able to complete otherwise. You won't. You just have to drive yourself. Okay, literature review. Depending on the type of data I needed, right? So cases, you go through the case law, and that's pretty straightforward. You would know that. In terms of libraries, I joined the Aegis Chambers Library. They had all the laws ranging right back to the British time, even before British time. I had to persuade them to take it out of log cabinets. So if you want laws, go there. They have very good selection of old laws, especially. I joined the University of Malaya Library. They have a lot of old books, and they have a pretty good